Once upon a time, I keep saying once upon a time, what's up with that? Once upon a time, there was a small Spanish girl who, after an unhappy marriage, fled, penniless and pregnant, to America, where she became a secretary. Suddenly, she began to swing deals of her own. She shipped Spanish rice to Japan, arranged credit for Greek ship owners, and invested her profits carefully. She invested in the musical Hair and quickly made $2 million.
She produced a couple hits, a couple flops, stole from some investors, and landed in jail for 2 years. Wow. She got out of jail and began masquerading as David Rockefeller's secret wife to swindle money out of investors. She gave initial investors the money they next sent. She gave initial investors the money that next sent. She gave the money, and then she took money from other people and gave money back to them, saying, "Oh, we made a profit," but it was really the other people's money.
After getting out of jail, the musical Senator Joe was the next project of infamous producer Adela Holzer. When the musical went into rehearsal, she said to the press, "I'm really humble, but I think that the theater needs me at this point."
Hashtag humble brag. The investors found out.
This started Adela Holzer Twitter.
When the investors found out they'd been scammed and Miss Holzer wasn't Rockefeller's secret wife, they reported to the press that she had assured them their money wasn't going into Broadway because it was too much of a risk.
Senator Joe, a musical about the life of feared and hated Cold War Senator Joe McCarthy, was written by Kroeger. Perry was also a performer, having made his Broadway debut in Hair at the age of 19. And here he was reunited with Hair's director, Tom O'Horton.
Now, the show was provocative and exciting to folks who saw it during its run in Pittsburgh, and it was described as a musical cartoon that took a satirical look at the life of Joe McCarthy, especially the Cold War witch hunt. And Adela's vision was that it would run in rep with another O'Horton project called Nimrod and the Tower of Babel, and it would open at the Virginia Theater on Broadway next.
That's a TDF bulletin back before computers when they just sent you a little slip being like, "Want a $10 ticket to Senator Joe?" Crazy. The show was provocative, and it was exciting to folks who saw it during its natural run. Now, everyone knew that the show had money problems. Out of town, they actually had to use cardboard cutouts of champagne because they couldn't use the actual thing. Couldn't afford it. Actors were being paid only in cash. Some weren't getting paid at all. They actually canceled a Saturday matinee. They hadn't advertised it, and only one ticket had been sold. I actually talked to someone who worked, and she was a sound assistant on the show, who said that they would pay all of these people in cash, and they wouldn't want to have all this cash and all that on them. So she kept going back into New York to deposit the cash in like the bank. She would travel to New York with like everybody's money.
From Pittsburgh?
From Pittsburgh.
Now, meanwhile, in New York, the Senator Joe marquee was put up at the Virginia Theater. But then Adela didn't have enough money to bring the show in, and so the Virginia made another booking for the future. So Senator Joe had its first preview right across the street, across 42nd Street at the Neil Simon Theater. 52nd Street at the Neil Simon. But the marquee was still across the street at the other theater. So if you saw Senator Joe on January 6, 1989, you walked into a theater that said Kenny Loggins on Broadway on the marquee.
The marquee was literally across the street. It's crazy. On a separate note, do you know what marquee they took down at the Virginia to put up Senator Joe? They took down the Kerry marquee. Does that make me want to have lived in the 80s?
We did.
Yeah, but we were like, suck your thumbs, I'm going to see Senator Joe. This was also the season that started with Legs Diamond.
Legs Diamond. Strangely, different sources reported different things about what happened next in the Senator Joe tale. So some newspapers say the show played one preview and then Adela ran out of money. Some say the show played 3 previews and then closed without officially opening.
Senator Joe became part of history, one of only 6 musicals ever that closed during previews on Broadway. We actually looked this up, and of the 6 musicals, Senator Joe got the chance to play the least number of previews, so this is an all-time record. It's a fascinating show. Now here to set all of the stories straight, original Senator Joe cast member Kristen Gray and musician Michael Ray, but first, the writer of Senator Joe, Perry Kroeger.
You guys know more about this show than me. It's amazing. I have to ask this question. Who has heard of this show? I don't have a lot of funny anecdotes, but it's a pretty interesting story what happened, actually. And it turns a corner in the middle here where we do a second production that no one even knows about. But first of all, do you know who Tom O'Horgan is? Yes, okay. Maybe you know this or not, but I think he holds the record of the only Broadway director that had 4 shows running simultaneously. And they were Hair, Jesus Christ Superstar, Lenny, and Inner City. And Inner City, the book was written by Eve Miriam, or the lyrics were at least, I know, and that's part of this story. Okay, let me read this. In 1988, which was the same as Legs Diamond, so there was another book musical. That's all right. Tom O'Horgan wanted to create an opera company that combined pop music and opera, and this resulted in a New York opera company. He wanted to compose music. He was an accomplished composer. He had composed the score for Alice in Wonderland. Have you ever heard of that movie? Yeah. Let's see. He asked 3 friends to write the libretti. "'Tis Pity She's a Whore," based on the, I think, Ford play, was going to be written by Eve Miriam. "Nimrod" was to be written by Jonathan Walker. Now, you may know him as an actor. He just did Divine Sister opposite Charles Bush. That was just this past season. And "Senator Joe" was to be written by me. Eve Miriam passed away, and so only "Nimrod" was written by Jonathan Walker. And "Senator Joe" was written by me. "Senator Joe" was never meant to be a Broadway show. We wrote it as an off-Broadway political cartoon and a sort of Brechtian pastiche for the 80s. But long story short, Adela Holzer came on board as producer. There were no off-Broadway venues available for "Senator Joe" and the other operas. So, as a last resort, the show would just have to go to Broadway. And I remember where I was on the phone, I remember the weather, everything, when Tom phoned me and he said, "Well, she wants to take it to Broadway." And my first thought was, that's the end of the show. But it wasn't the end of the show, as you suggest. The result was 2 previews, 2. I say 2. Yeah. 3? Was it 3? Ricky Coombs? Yeah. 3? Okay. Don't like 2, I don't know. The result was 2 previews at the Neil Simon Theater. It never opened and it was never reviewed. That much I know. And it ended on the morning of the 4th preview, apparently, with Adela Holzer being arrested at the phone booth and taken to Rikers Island. And to this day, I do not fully understand how she was financing that production. But there's all sorts of stories out there. But moving on. Few people realized that there was a second production. In 1992, producer David Buckley, and the only thing I know that he produced previously to this was Debbie Does Dallas. Do you know? I love that stuff. In 1992, producer David Buckley took Tom and me to Moscow. I stayed on at the Moscow Art Theater, and this time as the show's designer. And actually, most of these pictures here, those are my designs on the Moscow Art Theater stage. I also designed. And actually that gave me the distinction of being the first American to design for the Moscow Art Theater. And for 4 months we built the show there. Back in America, David Buckley was, again, some producer who was unable to raise the funds to bring the New York actors to Russia, and for the second time, the entire show was trashed. Oh, I hear that. Oh, don't believe me. But the Moscow Arts Theater, on their dark night, which was a Monday, hung the entire show for me that I had designed, and they photographed it. And I have a full set of photographs of the entire show. By that time, I had been in Moscow for so long, I had made friends, They dressed up me and all my friends and were posing there. And they sent me back, and this is during Perestroika. It was weird there. Women were on the street in mink coats selling bars. It was so very strange. Now, where was I? Pictures you just saw, you saw those. Okay. Kristen Gray was only 18 when she was hired to perform in Senator Joe by Adela. And she was the original Mamie Eisenhower, the original Aideen Celeste, and the original Fatty Deposit in the now legendary liver scene, which if anyone's seen this show, they always remember the liver scene, and actually that's the Moscow version of the liver, up there, the red one. And also in the audience tonight we have Ricky Coombs, who was the white blood cell in the liver scene. So it's a little bit of a reunion, and we hope to have a bigger reunion somewhere else soon. Okay, that's it. That's it for me. Should we do this song?